Picture this: one of the greatest songwriters in history, the man who literally changed the face of popular music, sits down and tells you that music today is worse than it's ever been. Not just different, not just evolving, worse. When Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation, the Nobel Prize winner in literature, says music is dying, you might want to listen. But here's what's shocking. He's been saying this for decades, and what he predicted back in the 80s is happening right now in ways even he couldn't have imagined. Today we're diving deep into Bob Dylan's controversial take on why music keeps getting worse. And trust me, some of what you're about to hear might make you completely rethink everything you know about the music industry. Before we get into Dylan's critique, let's talk about who exactly is making it. Bob Dylan was born Robert Allen Zimmerman on May 24, 1941, in Minnesota. By the early 1960s, he'd moved to New York City and quickly became the defining voice of his era. This wasn't just another folk singer strumming a guitar. Dylan infused folk music with intellectualism, poetry, and social commentary in ways nobody had done before. Songs like Blowin' in the Wind and The Times They Are A-Changin' became anthems of the civil rights movement and the anti-war protests. He won a Nobel Prize in Literature in 2016, has sold an estimated 125 million records worldwide, and has influenced virtually every major artist who came after him. This is someone who's witnessed the entire evolution of popular music, from the folk revival to rock and roll, from punk to hip-hop, from analog to digital. So when Dylan speaks about music, he's not just some grumpy old musician complaining about kids these days. He's someone who fundamentally shaped what modern music became. So, what exactly did Dylan say? In a series of interviews from the late 1980s, Dylan dropped some brutally honest observations about where music was heading, and looking back now, his words feel almost prophetic. He pointed to something that might surprise you: money. Not the lack of it, but the abundance of it. Dylan explained that when he started his career in the early 60s, there was essentially no money to be made in music. He said if you could just support yourself as a musician, you were doing good. There wasn't this massive billion-dollar industry that exists today, but here's where it gets interesting. Dylan argued that this lack of money was actually a good thing for music. Musicians back then weren't getting into the business to get rich. They were doing it because they had to, because making music was their destiny, because there was literally nothing else they could do with their lives. Dylan wrote in his memoir Chronicles Volume 1 that most popular music artists today, making music isn't their destiny, they're in it for other reasons. Then he turned his attention to technology, and this is where things get really fascinating. Dylan observed that machines were making most of the music. He asked a question that still resonates today. Have you noticed that all songs sound the same? Back in the 80s, he was talking about synthesizers and sequencers. Today, we're dealing with streaming algorithms and artificial intelligence. The complaint remains eerily similar. Dylan explained that recording had become dangerously easy. In the 60s, bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Dylan himself had to pay their dues before making a record. They played around, they performed, they built experience. But by the 70s and 80s, bands expected to make records right away, without anyone even hearing them play live. And solo artists, if they were good-looking or had a decent voice, were expected to do it all immediately. But Dylan warned that without experience to back it up, these artists would just become disposable, mere instruments of producers who took control over the records. Here's the kicker. Dylan said that if you don't have experience to go with talent, you're going to be disposable. Think about that for a second. In today's world, you can literally make music from your bedroom with software. You can upload it instantly to streaming platforms. Artists can blow up overnight with one viral TikTok song. But how many of them are still around a year later? How many become actual careers versus one-hit wonders who disappear as quickly as they arrived? Dylan wasn't finished. He pointed out something that music producers don't want you to think about. The increasing commercialization was turning music into a product rather than an art form. People were going into music just to make money. And when profit becomes the primary motive, artistry takes a back seat. The result, according to Dylan, is predictable. So much mediocrity going on. Dylan's comments sparked immediate controversy, and they still do today. Some people accused him of having what they call old man syndrome, that tired complaint every generation makes about the next generation's music being garbage. Others pointed out the irony. Dylan himself was criticized in the 60s when he went electric, when folk purists literally booed him at concerts and called him a traitor. How could he now be the one complaining about musical evolution? But Dylan never backed down from his position, and more importantly, he never stopped creating. While critiquing the industry, he continued his never-ending tour, which began in 1988 and continues to this day. He kept releasing albums, kept experimenting, kept pushing boundaries. His actions suggested something important. He wasn't against new music or evolution. He was against the commercialization and the shortcuts that technology enabled. So was Dylan, right? Let's break this down. On one hand, there's absolutely incredible music being made today. Genres have exploded into subgenres. Artists have more tools than ever to create exactly what they envision. The democratization of music production means talent from anywhere in the world can be heard. You don't need a record label's approval to share your art with millions of people. But on the other hand, Dylan's concerns have materialized in concerning ways. Streaming algorithms do push similar-sounding music because they're optimized for engagement, not artistry. The average attention span for music has plummeted. Songs are getting shorter to fit streaming metrics. Many modern pop songs are written by the same small group of producers, using identical chord progressions and structures. The music industry has become more concentrated and profit-driven than ever, with 3 major labels controlling roughly 80% of the market. And here's something Dylan couldn't have fully predicted: artificial intelligence. We now have AI that can generate music, clone voices, and create entire songs without human musicians. The very question of what makes music authentic is being challenged in ways that would have seemed like science fiction in the 80s. Dylan's core argument was that when you remove the struggle, the dedication, the years of paying dues, you remove something essential from the music itself. When anyone can make music instantly, when the barrier to entry is basically zero, does that democratize art, or does it flood the market with mediocrity? The answer might be both. Despite his criticisms, Bob Dylan remains an active and relevant force in music. He's released critically acclaimed albums in recent years, including Rough and Rowdy Ways in 2020. He continues touring relentlessly. In 2024, a biographical film called A Complete Unknown was released, introducing Dylan's story to yet another generation. At 83 years old, he's still creating, still performing, still proving that longevity in music is possible when your foundation is genuine artistry rather than commercial trends. His warnings about music weren't the complaints of someone who stopped caring. They were the observations of someone who never stopped caring, who kept creating through every trend and technological shift, who understood that real artistry requires more than just access to tools. So what can we learn from Dylan's perspective? First, easy doesn't always mean better. The accessibility of music creation is amazing, but it doesn't replace the value of experience, struggle, and dedication. Second, profit and art don't always align. When commercial success becomes the only measure of good music, we lose something vital. Third, technology is a tool, not a replacement for human creativity and authentic expression. But here's perhaps the most important lesson. Good music has always existed alongside mediocre music. In Dylan's beloved 60s, there was plenty of forgettable commercial pop. The difference now is the sheer volume. We're drowning in music, which makes the great stuff harder to find but no less valuable. The real question isn't whether music is getting worse, it's whether we're willing to dig deeper than the algorithm's first recommendation. Are we willing to support artists who take risks? Are we willing to listen to full albums instead of just singles? Are we willing to value artistry over virality? Bob Dylan's critique of modern music wasn't pessimism, it was a challenge. A challenge to artists to aim higher than disposable content. A challenge to listeners to demand more than algorithmic sameness. A challenge to the industry to value artistry alongside profit. Whether music is truly getting worse or just evolving in ways that make traditional artistry harder to sustain is something each of us has to decide for ourselves. So here's my question for you. Do you think Dylan was right? Is music getting worse, or are we just getting old and nostalgic? Have you found amazing new artists that prove him wrong, or do you feel like everything sounds the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, smash that subscribe button, because we've got plenty more controversial music takes coming your way. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best way to fight mediocre music is to support and create the music you actually want to hear.